Velma Lewis paid off her house in 1961. Her mother bought it. Velma lived there for decades. No mortgage, no debt, nothing hanging over her head. Then one morning, sheriff's deputies showed up with a battering ram. They weren't there because she committed a crime. They were there because she owed $6,200 in property taxes. She lost the house. And here's the part that should bother you, even if you've never missed a tax payment in your life. The Supreme Court actually ruled on a case just like this, 9-0. A woman in Minnesota owed $15,000 in back taxes. The county took her house, sold it, and kept all the money. Her house was worth $40,000. The Chief Justice himself said that woman had given the government a far bigger contribution than she ever owed. 9-0. That's not a close call. That's every justice on the bench agreeing that what happened to her was wrong. Now, here's the twist. While stories like this keep happening, there's also a brand new law signed at the end of 2025 that lets some seniors cut their property tax by up to 65%. 65%. That's not a typo, and it's not a scam headline. It's real. It's in New York right now, and similar moves are happening in Texas and Florida too. But most people who qualify for this will never see a dime of it. Not because they're not eligible, because of one small, boring, bureaucratic reason that we're going to get into. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'll just defer my taxes, I'll deal with it later, that's fine, I'll hold off, stick around. Because that decision, the one that feels like the safe move, the easy move, might be the exact thing that forces your kids to sell your house after you're gone, just to pay off a debt you didn't even know you were creating. So let's talk about what's actually happening with property taxes for people 65 and older in 2026, what this new loophole actually is, why so many people miss it, and what the deferral trap really looks like once you see the numbers. Let's start with why this year specifically feels different. If you're on Social Security, you got a cost of living increase for 2026, 2.5%. That's it. 2.5% is barely enough to cover the rise in your grocery bill, let alone anything else. Meanwhile, property taxes in a lot of areas went up 9 to 15%, in some places more, and this isn't a local fluke. Recent data shows about 92% of major metro areas in the country reported tax increases. 92%. That's almost everywhere. The average property tax bill in the country is now around $4,427 a year. That number itself went up nearly 4% in just 1 year, and it's rising faster than general inflation. Here's the part that really stings for people who've owned their home a long time. Real estate values, looking at broad market data, climbed about 53% from 2005 through early 2026. So if you bought your house decades ago for, say, $150,000 and it's now worth $400,000, your county isn't taxing you based on what you paid. They're taxing you based on what it's worth today. On paper, you're sitting on a pile of money. In real life, that money is locked inside the walls of your house, and you can't pay your tax bill with it unless you sell or borrow against it. There's a name for this: house rich, cash poor. You own an asset worth a small fortune, and you're stressed about a $400 increase in your monthly payment. And that's not a hypothetical number. A woman in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, called into a local advocacy group and said exactly that. Her payment went up $400 a month just from property taxes. Not rent, not a new mortgage, taxes. The advocacy spokesperson put it plainly. People aren't just losing their homes to tax liens anymore. They're losing them to the bank because the monthly payment with taxes included has gone past what anyone budgeted for. So let's be honest about what's going on here. The common assumption is, if you paid off your house, you're safe. No mortgage means no risk, right? Wrong. Paying off your mortgage doesn't mean you're done paying for your house. It means you've switched from paying a bank to paying your local government every single year, for as long as you live there. And unlike a fixed-rate mortgage, that number can go up, a lot, whenever your local assessor decides your home is worth more. Picture this for a second. 2 lines on a graph. One line is your income, creeping up 2.5% a year if you're lucky. The other line is your property tax bill, jumping 9, 12, 15% some years. Those 2 lines used to be close together. Now the gap between them is getting wider every single year. That gap, that growing space between what comes in and what you owe, is exactly what this video is about closing. Because here's the thing, there is a way to shrink that gap, sometimes dramatically, but there's also a way that looks like it shrinks the gap and actually just kicks the problem to your kids with interest attached. Let's talk about that second one first, because a lot of people think it's the solution, when it's actually a trap with a very long fuse. It's called a property tax deferral program. States like Oregon, Minnesota, Washington, Massachusetts, and Illinois offer some version of this. Here's how it works, in plain terms. The state pays your property tax bill for you. You don't pay it. You get to stay in your home, keep living your life, no immediate bill. Sounds great, right? Here's the catch. That money the state paid on your behalf doesn't disappear. It becomes a lien on your house, and it accrues interest. In Illinois, that's 6% simple interest every year on the growing balance. In Oregon, it's typically around 6% historically, though it can be adjusted. Washington runs about 5%. Let's do the math on what that actually looks like over time, using a real example pulled from how Oregon's program works. Say you defer $4,000 a year in property taxes. Just that one program, running for 10 years, with 6% interest compounding on the balance. By the time you sell the house, or by the time you pass away and your estate has to settle up, that lien could be worth $50,000, maybe $60,000, from an original $4,000 a year. And here's the part that catches families off guard. In Illinois, the program documentation flat out says it. In many cases, heirs first discover this deferral during probate, or during the closing process when they're trying to sell the house. They're going through their parents' affairs, dealing with grief, dealing with paperwork, and suddenly there's a number they've never seen before. A lien with years of accumulated interest, and it has to be paid before they can settle the estate or transfer the property. Sometimes, the documentation notes, heirs are forced to sell the property just to cover that deferred balance plus interest. So think about what that actually means. The parent avoided a bill of, let's say, $4,000 a year, felt like relief. Felt responsible even, like they were managing their money carefully. But the bill didn't go away. It went underground, grew quietly for a decade, picked up interest the whole time, and then resurfaced as a much bigger bill, handed to the person least prepared to deal with it at the worst possible time. This is not a scam, it's not illegal. It's a legitimate government program, and for some people, it's genuinely the right call. Especially if you're planning to sell the home yourself eventually, or if you simply don't have anyone to leave the home to, and you need the cash flow now more than you need to preserve the home's value. But here's the distinction that matters, and it's one a lot of people blur together. An exemption reduces what you owe. Permanently, it's gone. A deferral postpones what you owe and adds interest while you wait. One of these makes your problem smaller. The other one makes your problem someone else's problem, and a bigger one at that. So if deferral isn't the magic fix, what is? That's where this loophole, the real one, comes in, and it's bigger than most people realize. 2229. Let's go to Texas first, because the numbers here are honestly kind of staggering, and most Texans 65 and older haven't fully caught up to what changed. In November of 2025, Texas voters passed two propositions, Proposition 11 and Proposition 13. Proposition 11 raised the senior and disability exemption from $10,000 to $60,000. That's a six-fold increase. Proposition 13 raised the general homestead exemption from $100,000 to $140,000. Here's the part people miss. Both of these changes were made retroactive to the 2025 tax year, which means the relief is already showing up on bills due in 2026. Now stack these two exemptions together, $140,000 from the general homestead exemption plus $60,000 from the senior exemption. That's $200,000 total, shielded from school district taxes. So if you're 65 or older in Texas and your home's appraised value is $200,000 or less, school district property taxes on that home can be reduced to zero. Not lower, zero. For a lot of older Texans living in modest homes they've owned for decades, this is the difference between a real tax bill and no school tax bill at all. Now let's go to New York, because this is where that 65% number from the beginning comes from. In December of 2025, Governor Hochul signed legislation, officially named S5175A and A3698A. What it does is let local governments, counties, cities, towns, villages, school districts increase the senior property tax exemption from a maximum of 50% of assessed value up to 65%. Think about that increase. 15 percentage points on top of an already substantial 50% reduction. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The law gives localities the option to adopt this. It doesn't force them to. So whether you actually get this benefit depends entirely on whether your specific town, county, or school district decides to opt in. And even then, you still have to qualify based on income limits set locally. One estimate puts the average savings from this expansion at around $300 a year for the average qualifying senior. Now, $300 a year isn't life-changing on its own. But remember, this is layered on top of New York's existing programs. Enhanced Star, for seniors 65 and up, currently has an income limit of $98,700 for 2026. That's a higher threshold than a lot of people assume, which means plenty of retirees who think they make too much to qualify actually don't. Then there's SEHE, the Senior Citizen Homeowners Exemption, which can reduce assessed value by up to 50% for seniors with income under roughly $58,399. Combine SEA with Enhanced Star, and some seniors can cut their total property tax bill by more than half. Now, Florida. Florida has something called the Long-Term Resident Senior Exemption. If you're 65 or older and you've lived in your home for 25 years or more, this exemption can shield up to $250,000 of your home's value from non-school taxes. $250,000. For someone who's lived in the same modest house since the 1990s, that can completely change their tax bill. And there's something else happening in Texas worth mentioning, even though it's still just a proposal. It's been nicknamed Operation Double Nickel. The idea is to lower the age threshold for certain property tax benefits from 65 down to 55. If that moves forward, it would mean a whole new group of people who aren't even retired yet, would suddenly qualify for relief they currently don't have access to. So here's where I land. We've got Texas potentially zeroing out school taxes for homes under $200,000. New York layering exemptions that can cut bills in half with a new 65% option on the table. Florida shielding $250,000 in value for long-term residents. This is real money, not $300 here and there. We're talking about exemptions that, depending on where you live and how long you've owned your home, could be worth thousands of dollars every single year for the rest of your life. So why isn't everyone already getting this? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost none of these exemptions are automatic. You have to apply, and the application window is usually short and usually early in the year. In Texas, the window typically runs from when you turn 65 through April 30th of the following year for that tax year's benefit. In Florida, the deadline is March 1st. In New York, it's typically between January 1st and around March or April 1st, depending on the locality. And if you miss it, in many states, there's no retroactive recovery. You don't get the money back later. You just pay full price for that entire tax year, and you wait until next year to try again. Let's make this concrete with a hypothetical, based on how these programs actually work. Say there's a man, we'll call him Bob, 67 years old, living in Texas. He turned 65 2 years ago. He owns his home outright. He qualifies for that combined $200,000 exemption we talked about. But nobody told him he had to file Form 5114 with his local appraisal district. He just assumed, since he's a senior and everyone talks about senior tax breaks, that it would just show up on his bill. It didn't. For 2 years, Bob paid full freight. Based on typical school tax rates in Texas, that combined exemption could easily be worth somewhere around $1,500 to $2,000 a year in tax savings for a home in that value range. Over 2 years, that's potentially $3,000 to $4,000 that Bob paid that he didn't have to pay, simply because a form sat unfiled. This is the loophole inside the loophole. The system isn't designed to chase you down and hand you money. It's designed so that the money sits there quietly until you ask for it. If you don't ask, it just stays with the county. So here's what we do with all of this. Step 1. Call your county assessor or tax collector's office. This week, not someday. Ask 3 specific questions. Do I currently have any property tax exemptions active on my account? What exemptions am I eligible for based on my age and income? And what is the deadline to apply or renew? Step 2. Ask about an assessment cap or freeze. Florida's Save Our Homes provision, for example, limits how much your home's taxable value can increase each year to 3% or the inflation rate, whichever is lower, regardless of what's happening with market prices. Many other states have some version of this. It won't lower your bill today, but it puts a ceiling on how fast it can grow. Step 3, and this one's for anyone who decides deferral is genuinely the right tool for their situation. If you do choose to defer, tell your heirs, in writing. Don't let them find out during probate. A simple letter, a line in your will, a conversation at Thanksgiving, whatever it takes. The goal isn't to avoid using deferral if it makes sense for you. The goal is to make sure the people who inherit your home aren't blindsided by a number they've never heard of. And if you're not 65 yet, but you're getting close, there's a longer game here too. The retirees who handle this best aren't just the ones who know the tax code. They're the ones who built a second income stream before they needed it. Something flexible, something that doesn't depend on a paycheck or a fixed schedule, so that when a tax bill jumps unexpectedly, it's an adjustment, not a crisis. Here's where I land on all of this. The money from these exemptions isn't a bonus. It's not the government being generous. It's money that was already legally yours, sitting in an account with your name on it that you have to walk up and claim. Meanwhile, deferral, the thing that looks like the generous option, the thing that feels like someone's finally cutting you a break, is often just a loan with your house as collateral and your kids as the eventual loan officer. The difference between these two paths doesn't come down to which state has better laws. It comes down to whether you make one phone call before a deadline that's probably closer than you think. So here's a real question, and I'd actually like to know what you think. Does it feel fair to you that someone can live in the same home for 30 years, pay it off completely, and still face the possibility of losing it over a tax bill, while the exemptions that require the homeowner to track down a form and a deadline on their own? And second part of that, if you had to choose, would you rather take the exemption that's smaller but permanent, or the deferral that's bigger now, but becomes a bill for your kids later? Drop your state in the comments. Next video, we're going block by block through specific states so you can see exactly what applies where you live. And if this helped, do yourself a favor. Put a reminder in your phone right now for the application deadline in your state, because that's the one action that actually turns everything we just covered into money in your pocket.